Hi, everyone. I'm Lars Hallett, a Veriditas faculty member, and I'm really delighted to have the Reverend Dr. Lauren Artress and Robert Ferre here to join me for a special conversation in honor of the 25th anniversary of Veriditas. Welcome, Lauren and Robert. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Hey, great.
Thanks, Lars. It's fun to do this.
Yeah. So, how were you all doing in 1994, 1995 as the transition of that year? I was just wondering, maybe Robert and Lauren, if you could tell me kind of where you were in your lives at that point.
Well, should I start? I was canon for special ministries at Grace Cathedral. And because I was doing so much travel with the Labyrinth since 1992, I was on part-time at that point. It's also a good thing to do if you're going to write a book, to be not full-time at the institution, you know. And so I was busy, I was traveling, lots was going on, and just kind of doing what was in front of me.
And for me, I think the key was that I was available. At the time, I was working with commercial real estate management. I have kind of a dual history where I go back and forth between artistic endeavors and real estate in my background. And I didn't see that as going to be a long-term career. I just saw it as kind of filling in until whatever came next. And it turned out that what came next was labyrinths. So when that happened, it wasn't a big decision to give up the real estate and to go full-time with the labyrinths. And that's just exactly what I did.
I think that's a really good point, Robert, about being available, because that was true for me too. I kept reinventing myself, and I had, you know, the support of Alan Jones, the dean of the cathedral, and just to kind of keep following and doing what I need to do, and great cooperation to go part-time, to get a new title as a canon, all of that kind of stuff. But being available is really an important point.
And you'll find that there are quite a few synchronicities going on here. And that's really when something really great happens. It's usually the coming together of a whole bunch of small synchronicities that end up being something really big. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see as we go through this, there were a lot of things that just kind of fell in place. And I've always said that the labyrinth has found its own way in the world, and it certainly helped find itself in 1995.
Well, that's for sure. And for me, you know, the work opened in 91, you know, through Gene Houston walking just a taped one. And then that sent me to Shard in August of 91. And then the synchronicities, I absolutely agree with that. And I think the Labyrinth actually sets that up. That it really was all of this, meeting the right people, having everything just coalesce, moving the chairs in August of 91, down on our hands and knees in November, painting on the first canvas Labyrinth, all of that just unfolded. No pun intended.
Yeah, and I think in 1995, you see a real crystallization, like you at Grace, you had the canvas labyrinth indoors, and then just in 94 had dedicated the woolen tapestry carpet labyrinth inside. And you were about to publish Walking a Sacred Path. So could you, Lauren, tell us about the writing of Walking a Sacred Path and what that was like, bringing that out into the world in 95?
Sure. It was really, again, kind of going through what's in front of me. And I was traveling a lot, and I didn't start writing until June of 1995, and the manuscript was due in December of 1995. Wow. I do well with deadlines, but it was a little close. But what actually happened, I did a workshop in Richmond, Virginia, and it was the last one. I'm saying I didn't schedule anything more. June, I got to get to write this book. And the plane was in a huge thunderstorm on the ground and on the tarmac, and the belly of the plane got soaked with water, and the labyrinth got soaked with water. And so I was grounded. That's the way it goes. I didn't have any place to travel, and I didn't have any labyrinth to travel with.
Wow, so the labyrinth was looking out for you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And the process of writing was fun. It really was taking the workshops that I was doing and putting them into another form.
And then Robert, I believe that was when you also kind of first heard about Lauren's work with the labyrinth, not through the book, but through an article that you had read.
Yes, it was actually my wife, Ruth, who, as a psychotherapist, would read Common Boundary, the magazine. And in January, I don't know if it was the January issue or if she was reading an older issue, but there was an article in there about Lauren Artress doing something with the Chartres labyrinth. And what caught her eye was Chartres, not labyrinth. I didn't know anything about labyrinths, but I knew a lot about Chartres Cathedral. I'd already been going there for quite a bit of time. And so she showed it to me. And I had seen the labyrinth in Chartres, but I'd never studied it or really paid any attention to it. And so I called Lauren that spring, and she told me that the labyrinth is uncovered on the summer solstice. And so I changed the next, I was leading groups to France. I had a small travel company, and I was leading groups to pilgrimage sites in France. And I rearranged the schedule so that we would be in Chartres on June 21st, the summer solstice.
Wow.
And so that's what we did. And on that day, they removed the chairs and it's open during the day. But it's very crowded. It took like 2 hours to walk the labyrinth. I mean,
Oh, man.
It was really, really backed up. But I had the good fortune a few days earlier of meeting Francois Legault, who was the rector then, and Malcolm Miller, the esteemed tour guide of Chartres Cathedral, served as my translator. And in talking with Francois Legault, the point I made was that I was there to debunk all of the ridiculous theories that people have about Chartres Cathedral. And I wanted to write about the true history of Chartres Cathedral and why it was built and what it represented. Well, they get somebody every month who's going to go in and write the New Age secret book all about Chartres, and they don't tolerate that kind of thing. But he appreciated my approach and what I wanted to do. And so that helped my cause, and it ended up that we were allowed to go in after closing hours and move the chairs and then walk the labyrinth by ourselves with our group. And that was, in fact, the first labyrinth that I ever walked.
Wow.
I had not walked a labyrinth prior to walking the one that evening in Chartres Cathedral.
So Lauren, could you tell us about your kind of initial vision for the Labyrinth Network and how that really was giving birth to Veriditas at that point in 1995?
Well, I think you give me way, way, way too much credit. I didn't have a vision.
No vision.
You know, often I joke, people have heard this before, but the whole thing of please excuse the inefficiency of my work. The nature of it requires such a high degree of complexity that I simply don't know what I'm doing. And that was true. I mean, I didn't have this big vision. You know, I'm kind of an intuitive creator. And so I'm like a mole going under the ground, and occasionally you pick your head up and look around outside and go back in. So I didn't have a big vision. And maybe that was good. You know, maybe it was good because then, you know, I always say anybody who feels they own the labyrinth could ruin their spiritual life for sure. You know, to try to, you know, control it ego-wise, you know. So it just kept unfolding. It just kept unfolding. And, you know, so the vision of Veriditas, there was one clear conversation I had with Alan Jones, who was dean, and we were already there. We had our offices starting on operations started on January 1 or 2, 1996. And he and I had a conversation about the vision and the work of the labyrinth was far bigger than Grace Cathedral's reach into the world. And that surprised me. That really surprised me. And then it was like, oh, well, then maybe I need to create some kind of container to have a boundary actually with the cathedral. I mean, that's true too, but also to have a vehicle to be able to take it out beyond Grace Cathedral.
And is that what led to so you decided to have a nonprofit status when you knew that you would not be operating under Grace Cathedral?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I had been operating under Grace Cathedral for 4 years by that time.
Right.
And with great support, and, you know, my labyrinth work was paid through the cathedral to me and all of that. But it was like, okay, where is this going to go? What's the next step? Which is, of course, a great labyrinth question.
Yeah, and then reading back through Walking a Sacred Path, I could kind of see that it went from like being referenced as the Labyrinth Network to the Worldwide Labyrinth Project, and then to Veriditas, the Worldwide Labyrinth Project.
Yeah, because it was always the Grace Cathedral Labyrinth Project. And then, you know, just it felt right to green the planet with labyrinths. And so that's why we named it Veriditas.
Uh-huh.
You moved off of the Grace Cathedral property then to the Presidio or something a little bit later.
That's when, and I want to mention, you know, that Tom Keelan was so instrumental in helping put all this together.
Right.
And so, you know, he was sort of a risk taker too. And, you know, we just kept having ideas and moving and having ideas and all of that. But it did become time, Robert, partly because I wanted the labyrinth associated not only with Christianity, but with a consciousness movement,
Right.
you know. And so moving to Presidio really worked very well because it opened it. And now, you know, being connected with the Noetic Sciences and being on that campus for several years, you know, it really does open that to consciousness and a broader vision than specifically Christian, traditional Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you are expanding your circle further and further. You know, you're starting as the Grace Cathedral Project, Carpet, Tapestry Labyrinth, and then in 1995 you create the first permanent labyrinth at Grace Cathedral outside. So it's another anniversary of 25 years of creating the first permanent labyrinth at Grace Cathedral outdoors. So do you want to talk about a little bit about the birth of that outdoor labyrinth and the...
Yeah, it was interesting how that kind of came about because we, you know, in 1991, when we moved the chairs in Chartres Cathedral, the dean of Grace Cathedral was with us and 5 other congregation members, including myself. And then we had the canvas labyrinth for 37 months. We opened it March of 92, and then it became 1994. And I think I started raising money, but also the cathedral sort of took pity on me to roll this canvas labyrinth out twice a month. And then that's when we moved to the Tapestry. And then we had the earthquake that we knew the building was unstable, our office buildings. And so there became this big project of getting a new administration building and tearing down the old one. And then a labyrinth, just, I think mostly because of my colleague, Mark Lee, seeing the value in it, just put in the labyrinth in the plans.
Wow.
And the one thing I knew, which I think was wise, is I didn't say anything. I mean, I said, oh, great idea, you know, and then let it alone.
Wow.
People needed to own it.
Uh-huh.
The congregation needed to own it and not get in the way of their discovering it and using it.
When I came home from walking the labyrinth in Chartres Cathedral in June, that summer, I had what I really have to describe as a mystical experience. And I'm not one of those people that, you know, has a lot of deep things that appear to me or visions or anything like that. And I was working in the daytime in my commercial real estate job. But every evening, I would think, what shall I do this evening? And the urging was, I have to learn how to draw the Chartres labyrinth. And so I started every evening standing at my drawing table. I knew nothing about geometry. I had to go up and look things like, you know, diameter equals pi d. You know, I mean, really, I was starting from the very beginning. And for 2 months, I spent most evenings working on drawing the labyrinth until I finally arrived at my goal and I could draw it with only its internal proportions. I didn't need to make a measurement. As long as I knew one thing, the width of a line, the width of a path, the diameter, any single dimension, I could draw the rest of the labyrinth using a compass and a straight edge. And it was that preparation that allowed me, when I met Lauren in September and learned that she needed someone to make a labyrinth, to be confident that I could probably make a labyrinth for her.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's really incredible.
I remember us taking a walk, Robert, you know, at that conference and discussing it. And I remember saying, and I hadn't had this planned. I didn't know I was looking for a canvas maker,
Right.
you know, and I didn't know I was going to say, yeah, do you do tours? But, you know, you were the perfect person. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, you do tours to France and to Chartres, and, you know, here you want to make canvas labyrinths, and, you know, it was perfect.
There were a lot. The first year, we sent you 50 labyrinths.
Wow.
The first year, that's almost one a week that we
Amazing.
sent to you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And that's
So-
what, you know, that's what started the movement. And then training people and started in 97. So,
Yeah.
And so then, Lauren, on January 2nd, I heard from Tom Keelan. He said that was, you know, the real first day that you opened up your doors, and he began as associate director. And then that January 31st, you had your first paycheck, you know, as Veriditas. So do you want to talk about kind of that first month? You founded the nonprofit in 95, and then, you know, that January, that's when you really began as an organization, as Veriditas.
that's right. That's right. I can remember getting my first phone call from another state, Aurora, Colorado, you know, inquiring. You see, because the book was out by then. So that was getting, you know, a lot of traction and traffic. And we wanted the phone to ring. The cathedral didn't necessarily want to be that busy, but our little office was clicking away and the phone's ringing and all of that. And we had our offices on the second floor. And they moved us after a month or so upstairs because we were laughing too much. So we got this big corner up in the third floor for quite a while. And, you know, it was fun. It was challenging. Again, we were just creating. We always had this image, certainly Tom and I did, about, you know, it's a flight. That we're an air, you know, just an old little plane in flight. And we're out there gluing the wings together as we're in flight. And that was kind of what was happening. We kind of made it up as we went.
Don't I remember that you had something like 60 invitations from people that wanted you to come?
I did. And I gave Tom, I put him in I remember an orange folder, file folder, and that's how we started. I gave that file to Tom and he called people and arranged, and that's when I really probably shifted to traveling almost every weekend, if not during the week as well. Yeah.
So, you know, looking back on what crystallized in 1995, you know, how did you feel that year really affected the trajectory of the modern revival?
First of all, there was already the beginning of a labyrinth revival because dowsers were doing things with labyrinths for almost 10 years prior to this date. And so at their annual meetings and things, they would meet, but they would use mostly the classical labyrinth. I think what this did was bring the Chartres labyrinth into the foreground and bring it to a new audience, to churches and consciousness and therapists and people like that who probably weren't going to learn from the dowsers or interact with dowsers in their normal daily lives. So I think, first of all, it helped bring it to a new audience. And I think that if it hadn't happened this way, it would have happened in a different way. And so I think the benefit of this history is that Veriditas was very organized in training facilitators and bringing it out into the world. It would have been much more haphazard without this happening, but I think it would have happened, but it might have been a lot more crudely done.
Well, I agree. And if it hadn't happened with us and through us, it would have happened with someone else and through them.
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder if now, you know, 2020, can we know that this is an important moment, or is it something that just kind of happens and later you realize that it's kind of a pivotal point for the labyrinth and also for society?
I think most of the time it comes with hindsight. You turn around and look and say, wow, like you're doing, Lars, you know, zeroing in on the beginning point in 1995 for Veriditas and our 25th anniversary and anniversary of Walking a Sacred Path. You know, you can turn around and look at it and see it much easier.